The stadium is shaking to its very foundation, vibrating with a raw, primal energy that seems to take over everything in its path. Thousands of people are screaming in a synchronized frenzy, their voices joining together in a massive, overwhelming wave of collective human emotion. All of this intensity exists simply because a complete stranger just managed to kick a leather ball into a white polyester net. Total strangers are hugging each other in the stands, sharing a moment of pure euphoria as if they were lifelong best friends. People are literally crying as they stare at the digital scoreboard, emotionally surrendered to an outcome they have absolutely no control over. And then, in the middle of this electric chaos, there is you, standing perfectly still while the world moves in a blur. You are standing right there, but you feel like an alien from another galaxy, observing a strange and confusing tribal ritual. You watch them with a sense of detachment, wondering why this specific display of collective electricity simply doesn't reach your soul. You aren't necessarily bored with the event, but you are deeply confused by the level of intensity everyone else is displaying. You start to wonder if there is something fundamentally wrong with your brain, or if you were born without a connection chip. You ask yourself if you are missing that vital human connection chip that seems to plug everyone else into the game. Society might label you as unenthusiastic, boring, or cold, but those labels are just surface-level misunderstandings of your inner world. However, modern psychology suggests something much more fascinating about the way your mind is actually built and how it functions. Your lack of interest in the match isn't a void or a missing piece, it is actually a sign of specific architecture. It is a clear indication of a very specific cognitive structure that processes the world through a lens of deep independence. Today, we are going to dive deep into the silent science of why your mind chooses to ignore the stadium's roar. We will explore why you simply don't care about the score, and why that indifference is actually a psychological survival strategy. Most importantly, we will discover why this perceived lack might actually be one of your greatest and most hidden intellectual strengths. For the vast majority of people, sports serve as a modern, safe substitute for the ancient and violent reality of warfare. Thousands of years ago, your survival depended on your tribe. If they won the battle, you lived to see another season. This ancient us versus them software is still running in the background of the modern human brain, looking for new tribes. When a fan shouts, "We won!" their brain literally cannot distinguish between the athlete's physical achievement and their own personal identity. Psychologists call this phenomenon basking in reflected glory, where the self quietly claims a victory it did absolutely nothing to earn. But your brain is different. It didn't take the bait, and it refuses to surrender its identity to a colorful team jersey. You likely possess a high degree of internal locus of control, meaning you define your worth by your own personal actions. You don't experience a massive dopamine hit from someone else's victory because your brain demands a more direct form of satisfaction. Your reward system only recognizes the goals that you personally achieved through your own hard work, sweat, and focused daily effort. You have no interest in wearing a borrowed identity or pretending to be part of a story you didn't actually write. You want a real life, built on real choices, rather than an identity based on the unpredictable performance of a stranger. Many people who avoid the noise of sports culture are actually classified as highly sensitive persons by modern psychological standards. To a casual fan, the overwhelming noise and bright lights of the stadium are exciting, energizing, and full of life. But for your brain, this environment feels like a relentless sensory assault that produces deep depletion rather than a natural high. Your nervous system is wired to process every piece of information deeply, making loud, chaotic crowds feel physically and mentally exhausting. While others are watching a simple game, you are busy seeing 22 millionaires running across a field for 90 minutes straight. You find it difficult to ignore the fact that the world is facing massive, real-world problems while stadiums sell out instantly. You likely possess what researchers call justice sensitivity, an acute awareness of the gaps between societal pay and societal value. It is hard for you to justify why a reserve player earns more in a week than a life-saving surgeon earns. Once you have seen the matrix of commercialized sports and the money behind it, it becomes impossible to ever unsee it. Your apparent disinterest is actually a very quiet and private form of intellectual protest against the world's skewed financial priorities. People often mistake your silence for a lack of passion, but they couldn't be more wrong about what's happening inside. They are wrong because you actually have targeted passion directed toward things that offer real complexity and personal growth opportunities. While the sports world spends hundreds of hours watching others practice, you prefer to be the one doing the actual practicing. You choose to spend your limited time and energy on your own game, whether that involves code, art, or building things. Maybe you are mastering a new language, painting a masterpiece, or building a business from the ground up with your hands. You prefer the depth of a skill that is constantly evolving and challenging your mind in new, unexpected ways. You find no joy in the repetitive, predictable cycle of a sports season that starts over every single year without change. You don't want to just watch a story unfold on a screen. You want to be the main character of yours. But we must be honest with ourselves, because even this intellectual independence can sometimes lead into a very dangerous trap. Sometimes we use our intellectual detachment as a protective shield to keep the messy emotions of the world at bay. It is very easy to sit on the sidelines and judge the screaming fans, but are you truly engaging with life? Are you using your independence as a clever way to avoid being vulnerable or ever having to risk your own heart? Are you secretly afraid of the deep pain that comes with losing something that you actually allowed yourself to care about? Independence is a superpower, but it only counts if you actually have skin in the game and something real to lose. If you aren't invested in a team, that's fine, but you must ask yourself, what am I actually invested in? The next time you find yourself at a social gathering and the conversation inevitably turns toward the big game tonight, when everyone is talking about standings and player stats, you might feel the familiar urge to pretend that you care. But you don't have to fake it anymore, and you certainly don't need to apologize for your lack of borrowed excitement. You don't need to perform social camouflage just to fit into a room that doesn't speak your internal psychological language. Your brain didn't fail to connect to the tribe. It simply recognized that the tribe wasn't offering what you truly needed. You simply chose a different path, one that leads away from the stadium and toward a life of personal, quiet meaning. This is the path of independent thought, where you decide what is worthy of your limited time and your precious attention. It is a path of personal mastery and internal stability, where your happiness isn't dictated by a ball hitting a net. While the rest of the world is busy borrowing a story for the weekend, you are focused on something much larger. You are busy writing your own story, filled with real stakes, real challenges, and victories that belong only to you. And the best part about your story is that it doesn't have an off-season or a final whistle at 90 minutes. Your perspective starts with a simple, powerful question that most people in the stadium never even think to ask themselves. You look at the spectacle and ask, out of everything I could give my attention to, does this actually deserve it? And quietly, without any drama or need for external validation, your inner voice finally found the courage to answer, no. That no is not a sign of apathy. It is a sign of a person who knows exactly what they value. Not caring about sports isn't a personality flaw. It is a psychologically healthy state of being an independent, focused thinker. Research confirms this is a healthy strategy for managing your emotions and defining your own sense of purpose in life. It is a different, yet equally valid strategy for seeking meaning in a world that often prioritizes loud, empty spectacles. You are defining yourself through your own values and history, rather than through a temporary affiliation with a sports brand. This trait shows up more often in independent thinkers and creative minds than society is willing to admit or recognize. So, you don't have to perform interest you don't feel just to satisfy the expectations of the people around you. You can just know what you know, that your time is valuable, and your passions are yours alone to choose. Everyone else in that loud room might be borrowing someone else's story just to feel a fleeting sense of belonging. But you have been quietly and diligently writing your own story, one page at a time, in the silence of mastery. And the most exciting part of your journey is that your real story is only just beginning to unfold right now. This is the psychology of you, an independent mind in a world of tribes. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and stay true.